Hello, my name is William, the Avid reader, and today I'm reviewing Utopia, written by Thomas More in 1516. So this is the oldest book I'm reviewing so far, and it's a political fiction book, and it depicts basically what the author considers to would be a utopia of the world, and it's utopian socialism in a sense. So a lot of the things described in this book are very similar to the ideas of Karl Marx. So yeah, you can wanna read the origin of utopian socialism. You read this. So here are multiple parts of this book. So first you have three letters, so-called letters written from one friend to another, describing the island of Utopia and the country. Then you've got book one, which is a discussion on how thieves should be treated, handled. So they describe that at the time the thieves would be executed when they were caught, and instead they should be put into slavery as they were in Persia. Book two is about the utopian system, and it's explained by a character called Raphael. So he describes basically a collectivist socialist republic. People elect their leaders, and then the leaders basically rule on in an autocratic way. They have unlimited powers, and they're regularly elected, except for the governor that's elected for each city. I think the governor there, he's elected for life unless he screws up, then he loses his job. There's a hierarchy set, so you got the usual people, and you're put in these houses, and there's supposed to be 10 to 16 people living in these households, and if there's too much in one place, they're moved to a place where there's aren't enough. And the same way it works with the cities in the country, where if once city is overpopulated, it goes to an underpopulated city, and then if there's too much population of the island, then they just form colonies. Everyone works 6 hours a day, but they also do a lot of other things that the government wants them to do. So it's a bit like the fiction dystopia book The Giver, where you put in these hours to do this thing, so they're supposed to be studying or doing extra work or something like that. And there's no materialism at all, so they hate gold, and that's used to distinguish slaves. So you're a slave if you commit adultery, or a foreigner who's about to be executed, and maybe eventually you stop being a slave. So it's a bit like involuntary servitude, except that it's indefinite. And they wear gold around them, and gold signifies a thing of shame, so they're anti-materialistic. So everyone has the same dress, everyone is dressed the same, and they live by basically the motto, even if it's not said in the book, and to each according to his ability, in each according to its need. So there's a surplus on the island, so what they have in surplus of production, they export it to get in resources, because they need iron. So they import a lot of iron. That's the only resource they don't have. And then they also import gold and silver to use for war when it's necessary. And there's no immorality, it's described. So very rare crime is committed, and then they're reprimanded, or they're turned into a slave, or they're exiled. It's very rare. They hate death in this country. They very rarely execute, and you're supposed to look out for the public good, and there's supposed to be reciprocity. So you're not, when you do something, you're not supposed to be entitled to getting something back, because you will eventually get something back from the system. So that's you contribute. For example, everyone has to farm their first 2 years as an adult, and then they do another work, and you do a job, and then in return you get to take the resources that are in storages, and everyone can get to eat these superficial pleasures. They believe, like sex or eating too much, are bad, and religion they believe is a good thing, and atheism, although not illegal, is heavily frowned upon, and they're basically discriminated against. And when there's a war, they hire mercenaries because they view the people they hire usually as inferiors. So they send off people who they don't believe worthy really to die instead of their own citizens. Slavery is used as a punishment. So and there's control of traveling. So if you travel outside your district, your city, without permission from the government, then you can, if you do that twice, then you become a slave. And the description of this, even if it's described in a very positive light, is a totalitarian socialist state. It's very similar to the communist states of Karl Marx. So this book and the judgment on how people do that you're supposed to be a conformist, for me it's the description basically the worst things about religion, like the worst thing about the collectivism in religion, and then the worst thing about collectivism in socialism. And that's often those two forms of collectivism have very similar roots. And here you can see this in this book, Utopia. So there's an interesting video made by Knowledge Hub that it's actually dystopia what's described as, because it's, even if they don't call this slavery, this is effectively slavery, since from the view of a right-wing libertarian, a socialist state where everyone has to work for this and cannot expect anything in return, and you cannot trade freely, then you are a slave to the system instead of a slave to some feudal lord, to some fiefdom. So yes, so how would I rank Utopia? So it's a short read, and it's interesting. You learn a lot about basically it's a summary of what Karl Marx believes with some tweaks. So I would rank this 7 out of 10. So it's utopian, and the discussion of slaves and how the system works is pretty good and interesting. But then how they think that you should be punished for adultery and some such things, crimes of immorality, yeah, it does makes the book not as good. But it's a decent read, and you can read this very quickly. It's less than 200 pages. So yes, I would rank this 7 out of 10. So this was the Avid Reader's review of Utopia, written by Thomas More in 1516. I hope you enjoyed this review, and I will see you guys next time.